Greetings everyone and welcome to today's presentation. Last time when I gave an overview of how you can do an effective survey, the first thing we looked at in the overview was the aspect of general materials. So today what we are beginning doing is just to begin looking at the overview in more details, and we begin with general materials. There are two primary elements that are involved in any unified entity, and that is material and structure. That is the way the material is put together. That is when we are talking of structure. And remember, in structure, I mentioned that there are two things we looked at. We look at. The first one has to do with shifts of material emphasis, okay, or divisions or breaks, how the material is divided. And then the other aspect is the aspect of patterns, or a more technical term for patterns is structural relationships. Okay, so in today's presentation, you will be introduced to patterns or structural relationships, so that you begin to familiarize yourself with these patterns, even though the main focus is the material. Okay, so in terms of material, the question to be asked would be, what is the primary emphasis of the contents in this book? That is the material. So when we are looking at material, we are looking at what is the author's primary concern with this book. There are 5 major categories of general materials, and today we'll look at one, and that is biographical general materials. So, biographical general materials are books that present persons as the primary concern of their content. The book of Genesis is one of the good examples of biographical general materials. The book moves along according to the presentation of a series of main characters. Each of these characters is paired with a villain. The villain serves to highlight the features of the character by way of contrast. So what is happening in the book of Genesis is that the main character is being contrasted with the villain, okay? And that word contrast is one of the 17 patterns or structural relationships, okay? That's why I said in this presentation, we begin to be introduced to patterns. So when we are doing a contrast in scripture, we are identifying a pattern in our material. So we have a figure here of main character versus villain in the book of Genesis. So we have our characters there. So we have Genesis chapter 3, and our main characters being Adam and Eve, and we have the villain there as the serpent. Genesis chapter 4, we have the main character Abel and the villain being Cain. Genesis chapter 6 to 10, we have our main character there being Noah and the villains being his generation. We have Genesis chapter 11 to 26, and the first main character being Abraham and the villain being Lot. And then the second main character in these chapters is Isaac, and the villain being his half-brother Ishmael. You have Genesis 27 to chapter 36, and the main character being Jacob, and the villain being his twin brother Esau. Finally, we have Genesis 37 to 50, the main character being Joseph, and the villains being his brothers. Okay, so there you have, that's how, in terms of general materials, the work will look like in Genesis. And it makes it very easy for you to study and understand the Bible when you are doing your work like this. The book of First Samuel offers another example of biographical general materials. The book is concerned with the reversal of fortunes. So remember, in Genesis, we had a contrasting between the main character and the villain, okay, and that was a pattern we learned of, okay. Contrast is association of differences. Here we have another pattern which is cruciality. So cruciality is another pattern which you learn to identify in your material as you do your observation or survey. Okay, and in cruciality we have a reversal of what? Of fortune. So this could be in a case where somebody may not be doing well and then they start doing well. Or somebody is doing well and then they start going down. You know, I remember a colleague years back who told the story of a certain lady, they were living on the same flat. And he said, you see that lady, she was walking, he said she used to drive. And what she would do is that she's driving home, she'll see the husband walking, and she'll just bypass him, you know. But then it's like she lost her job, and now she no longer had a car. Okay, she was doing well, now she was not doing well. Now, guess what? The husband who was struggling now started doing well and started driving. And of course, he returned the favor to her. Okay, that is just being used to illustrate cruciality, a reverse of fortune. On one end, somebody is doing well and then they start doing badly, or somebody was doing badly and then they start doing well. That would be cruciality, and that's how the material is arranged in First Samuel. So we have an illustration here. Okay, so we have material in First Samuel according to reversal of fortunes. I've put a plus arrangement because we are going to observe also some patterns there. So we have chapter 1 to 12, and I've titled it Priestly Leadership or Spiritual Leadership. Okay, so always remember to title your divisions and even label them. I've labeled it using capital time Roman numerals there, which is 1. Okay, so our first division we have is priestly leadership or spiritual leadership. And the first characters there is Eli and his sons, okay, who are later rejected by God. And then we have other characters, which is Hannah and her son Samuel, who are favored by God. Then we come to the second main division of Samuel, and I've titled it Kingly Leadership or Physical Leadership. So you have priestly leadership representing spiritual leadership in the first division, and in the second division we are represented with physical leadership, which is kingly leadership. So we have Saul, who is rejected by God, and we have David, who is favored by God. So we have a contrast there. So you can contrast, you can make a contrast between Eli and his sons and Hannah and Samuel. On one end, you have Eli and his sons rejected, whilst Hannah and Samuel are favored by God. Okay? So we have the arrow there. That arrow is indicating a downward trajectory of Eli and his sons. They were previously doing well, now they start going down. We have the arrow going up, representing upward trajectory of Hannah and Samuel. In the second division of the material, main division of the material, we have another contrast between Saul and David. The contrast is that Samuel is going down and David, his trajectory is going up. So we have two contrasts in the first division and in the second division. Now, in structural relationships or patterns, we would call this a repetition or recurrence of contrast. Remember, there are three main categories of patterns. The first one was the pattern of repetition. The second one was primary patterns, or sometimes we call them, the more technical term, semantic patterns or semantic structures. The third being secondary, which are the rhetorical or auxiliary structures or patterns. Okay, so here there's a combination of the pattern of repetition with contrast. So we call it a recurrence of contrast or repetition of contrast, because the contrast has repeated itself in the first division and in the second division of the material. So that arrow is simply indicating the similarities in the characters. There's a similarity between Eli and his sons and so on. That is that both of these characters are rejected by God. Okay. Another similarity there we see is, or another pattern you can observe, is the pattern of cruciality. They started off, they were doing well, but then the trajectory was going down. They did not end well. Okay, so we have cruciality there. Then for Hannah and Samuel, there's a similarity also with David, in that their beginnings were humble, yet their trajectory went upwards. Okay, and then we have the pattern of climax in both Hannah and Samuel and David, and that is they are going towards a high point of culmination. Okay, they're going up, 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 up until they reach their peak. Okay, so that is another pattern that you will be learning about when you begin particularly looking at patterns or structural relationships. So practical exercise: identify any book in the Bible whose primary concern and emphasis is biographical general materials. Any book. And please, let's feel free to give and post our findings on the exercises that we are being given. It will be very helpful to me to evaluate to what extent we are grasping the information and the things that we are being taught. Thank you all, and stay blessed.